Okay, so now that we've got our feet under us a little bit in C#, it's time to build our first .NET app. And so I'm going to open Visual Studio. Now again, this is Microsoft Visual Studio 2022, not Visual Studio Code. This is the community version. And we're going to create a new project. And as we look for the projects, the easiest way I've found to find what we're looking for, the template we're looking for, is to type in MVC, which stands for Models, Views, Controllers. And so if we do that, the first option that pops up for me says ASP.NET Core Web App Model View Controller. Now again, ASP.NET is the technology. Core means that we can run it on Linux or Mac or Windows, whereas before, when it was ASP.NET without the core, you could only run it on Windows. And then Model View Controller, we'll talk more about exactly what that means, but this is this idea of division of duties, that we have a section for the models, which have to do with data, a section for the views, which have to do with what the user sees, and then what has to do with the controllers, which is the relationship between the models and the views. And so we'll go ahead and say next on this after we've selected it. I'm going to call this my first ASP.NET Web App Fun. All right, so that's the name of my app. And typically, when we were doing the C# projects, I would have had you check this box to say place the solution of the project in the same directory. I have found that it typically works better for students if they don't check this box with the .NET apps. So our solution file will be a level above in the folder of all the project information, and I think that just works better. So we'll click Next, and then we'll click, I'll leave it as .NET 8. We can configure for HTTPS. That one we could actually uncheck if we're worried about security, but I think that'll be good to look at. Meaning, if we're worried the security is going to give us trouble. It doesn't need to be a secure site or whatever, then we don't need to check that. But I'm going to leave it checked, and then I'll click Create. Now, if you're like me, the first time I came in and ran a .NET app, I looked at this and said, what is all this stuff? There's a bunch of files, and I don't even know, like, I'm used to starting with a blank app. And if I close this little splash screen and I just try and run it, now you may get an error or a box that will pop up here and say, do you trust this site? I got that the first time I ran it. And so you have to go through and say that, yes, I do trust this. It's certificate. So it wants, the problem is that what we're doing is potentially harmful to the computer if you allowed somebody who you didn't know and they'd written some program to come in and run on your machine. And so it wants to know, do you trust whoever's running this program? And that's ourselves. So hopefully we trust ourselves, and we're going to say, yes, we do trust ourselves. And so if there's those certificates say, do you trust this, or whatever the question is, I don't have it up in front of me, and you can click the box, don't ask this again, and say, yes, I trust myself. And then it may do it again for the, I can't think of the IIS, and then we're going to say, yes, we do trust it. And eventually when we run this app, we can run it out of different browsers. So currently I'm using Google Chrome. If I try it with Edge, let's see what this does. This is the one that was giving me trouble, yeah. So we might get something like this that's giving us trouble because it's saying, I don't know if you trust this code that's being run. And so I can say, instead of doing that, let's choose IIS Express. This is what we're going to want to use. The HTTPS is trying to run it in a secure way, but the IIS Express, it's mimicking as if we were running this up on a server somewhere. Now, as it turns out, the server currently is just located on our local machine, but it's emulating as if it were loading up to a server, and so we want to use IIS Express. And then it will run. So anyway, make sure you've checked those boxes to trust the certificates, and then, like I say, change that as we run it. We want to change it to well, I gotta stop it. So here's our little stop button. IIS Express. All right, so I run this, and this is the blank default app. You know, the one when you say, hey, I want to do an MVC project. This is what it comes up with at first, and it's got all sorts of stuff. It's got welcome, learn about building web apps. It's got a menu here that I can move around in. It's got a footer. Actually, if you click on this link, it gives you some good information about learning how to write apps in ASP.NET. And so I was like, man, this is crazy. This is the blank app. This is a new app. It's not, as it turns out, a blank app. It's just a new app. Let's take a look at a blank app. And so I'm going to go ahead and close this, or at least open another app. So I'm going to open Visual Studio again, and I'm going to create another new project. But this time I'm going to look for blank. And that's not exactly what I wanted to say. Let me do ASP.NET blank. Empty is the word I was looking for, sorry. Like, why is it not coming up? So ASP.NET Core empty. So this is an empty project. Now again, I'm going to look for this C# sign, C# right there, and I'm going to create an empty project that doesn't have all this stuff in there. I want to start from scratch, and so I don't really most of the time, but I say next there, and then I can give this a name. I'm going to call this my first ASP.NET blank project. Fun. Okay, so we've got our name in there, and again we'll leave this unchecked, and I'll say next, and then leave those options just like they are, and say create. Alright, so let's see what this one looks like. So now I don't have all those same folders and files that I had on the MVC template. Let's see what happens when I run this one. Now again, I think it'll give me a hard time because I'm trying to run the project itself, but I want to run it as if it was on the server, so I'll change this to IIS Express, and then and again, if you want to use a different browser here, you can change which browser you want to use, and there's other options we can look at, but I'm going to use IIS Express. I'll keep it in Edge, and it prints out hello world. So even the empty app does something. And you know, as I thought about this, I think the designers of ASP.NET, it's so big, it's so complex, there's so many different cool things you can do, and you have to have some sort of base. You have to have some basic, you know, switches on in order to make the app work. And so even the empty app is doing something. And so as it turns out, as we click on this program file, which is the only thing in here, we can see that hello world being printed, and it's happening through this map get statement, and then we have an app run. We don't know what any of this means yet. And so that's what we'll do next, is start going through and actually turning this into an app together. See you in the next video. Spencer out.